What is the new language war that is emerging in India? How is Kasargod at the center of it? And how new education policy remains the accelerator as well as origin of the language wars in India? India was reorganized on linguistic lines to manage diversity, not to weaponize it. Yet, today, a state law for language in Kerala is raising interstate disputes, it is raising constitutional questions and more. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to talk about not just the Malayalam Language Bill, why it is in question, and we will be also discussing the fueling language wars, where is the origin of NEP and the association with language war is coming, and everything around it. So let us begin with understanding that what exactly has been happening. So Malayalam Language Bill of the year 2025 is to be proposed in the Assembly of Kerala, and this has been already in question because it proposes that the compulsory first language in the state of Kerala in all government and the aided schools up to class 10th will be Malayalam. And in this particular context, an objection has been raised by Karnataka. So the Border Area Development Authority in Karnataka is saying that this is going to impact the Kannada speaking minorities which are living in Kerala, especially in Kasargod, which is a border district of Kerala. Adjoining Karnataka is right there. Now Kasargod, if you look at this particular district, it has historically been a bilingual region, but here we find the administrative integration was better with Karnataka economy based on education, labor economy, but it has been part of Kerala state itself. There was a similar bill which was brought in 2017, but this was rejected. However, we get to see that such bill is coming to the table again. Now, this very issue brings us to the escalation of language assertiveness that we are seeing, especially after new education policy had been introduced, and here education, medium of education and language, they are being used for federal as well as cultural confrontation between groups, political parties as well as the states. And when we talk about this bill, this is not an isolated event. You can understand this as a continuing pattern, an event in the continuing pattern where we have seen multiple agitations. So when we are talking about this particular pattern, let us try to understand that as well. So when we are talking about linguistic federalism model, which was brought when we were getting to see the reorganization of states back in 1956, the whole idea was accommodation and making sure that there is administrative ease. There was no focus that we got to see in terms of assimilation. And as of now, what is on table is that the linguistic majoritarianism in the states, that means whichever particular community or group has linguistic majority, they are the ones going for full approval across the state or the nation that we get to see. And in this context, it has been bringing in fears of central homogenization, which we get to see in Malayalam Language Bill as well. So if we are talking about this one particular language applicable across the state, what about minorities? What about other groups which have other mother tongues in place? This side we get to see Kasargod. And just like Kasargod, border districts are always the pressure point because that is where we get to see maximum friction because of presence of other mother tongues as well. Now, when we are talking about language in itself from the perspective of exam, you also have to understand here that it is a medium of education, and because of such friction, it becomes as a weapon, it becomes as a symbol of what? Sovereignty, but also making sure there is control. And that is why you will always see linguistic majorities asking for a certain languages is a way of marking their control. And over the years, we have seen that in anti-Hindi agitations, we have seen that in Marathi-Hindi contestation, we have seen in the conflicts related to Marathi, we have seen issues cropping up in Bangalore related to the regional language there itself. And this is nothing but a pattern that we get to see, that there is resurgence of language wars and language being used as a political weapon, as a political capital in itself. Now in this very context, when you have a fair idea that what Malayalam Language Bill is basically opening the foray to, now let us move to talk about that when we are looking into this particular bill, what are the constitutional consequences which are also being cited from Karnataka's end. So when we are talking about our constitution, it has provisions such as Article 350 and 350A, which put it on the state that it is their duty to provide mother tongue instruction. So if you are talking about Malayalam Language Bill, and especially from the reference of Kasargod, this gets violated. When we are talking about Article 30, we are talking about autonomy of minority education institutions. So if any minority education institution is receiving aid from the government, Kerala government, as per Malayalam Language Bill, this would also be compromised. Then we have Article 347, which talks about recognition of minority language in specific region, direct violation of this. And then we have the most known one from your perspective, Article 350B, which talks about a special linguistic officer for linguistic minorities. So if there will not be a linguistic minority because of linguistic majoritism and imposition of a certain language, what purpose it will serve? So when we talk about Malayalam Language Bill, at front it clearly seems into the violation of multiple constitutional provisions, and here we get to see the dilemma of compulsion and choice as well. If we talk about constitution, it is very clear, it protects the language right, but as options, not as obligation. And this is where we get to see that Malayalam Language Bill in coming future, it might be reserved by the governor for the presidential reconsideration. It might be reserved for judicial review, where it will be redefining limits of state language policy and bring some more clarity in it. And if this does not happen, there is this clear risk that there will be dilution of especially minority protection without any formal amendment also taking place. So this is the biggest risk in place when we are talking about such language wars, especially the minority language rights and the diversity that comes with the language that India is praised for, India is known for, that also gets compromised in this very scenario. Now when we are talking about Malayalam Language Bill, it is not just about the constitutional provisions, it is also about what consequences are at hand, especially for the purpose that this bill is being brought in for, that is education. So when we talk about educational consequences, the first thing that we get to see that there is going to be a huge problem at the implementation end, especially in terms of teaching, especially in terms of pedagogy. Because if you talk about new education policy, it talks about mother tongue is the main component which will be used to enhance comprehension. But this bill is the one which is saying that dominant state language should be used. This creates a contradiction. It will directly impact the Kannada medium students, increasing their cognitive load. They would have to put in more effort to understand, especially in higher classes. This might reduce their academic performance. This might also lead to higher dropout probability because of socio-economically weaker border communities that exist. And it will also have effect on teacher ecosystem. How we will get to see the effect on teacher ecosystem? The first thing you have to understand, we would need Malayalam and Kannada bilingual teachers to facilitate especially the Kannada medium students. And as of now, they are running a shortage. Furthermore, the curriculum redesign would be required to ensure the implementation of the bill that we are talking about, and that comes with costs. And as a result, we might be seeing that there is new inequality making space in our society, that is educational inequality, and that is not induced by economic ends. This is being induced because of the language, and which will do nothing but undermine the demographic dividend that India is very keenly looking forward to become the developed country that it is aiming for by 2047. So we are compromising that as well. Now that we have understood the dimension around Malayalam Language Bill, now let us move forward and connect the dots in terms of dimensions with new education policy as well. Because if we talk about new education policy 2020, we have to understand that it does bring change in terms of language of medium, and it has three main language pillars. First, it talks about multilingualism. It also talks about Indian language promotion. And the most contentious one is the flexible three language formula, where imposition of Hindi has been contested a lot, has been in news a lot, and has been agitated against a lot. Now, so when we are talking about implementation of this language pillar, because the flexibility has been left with the states, states have been weaponizing new education policy and the flexibility so that they can bring in the dominant languages. And a very good example right here, the Malayalam Language Bill by Kerala, which is showing that this is a effort to bring in linguistic consolidation because there is fear of cultural dilution. Before NEP comes into picture and this is imposed, we want to make sure that cultural dilution does not happen. How we'll do it? We will do it via language. And this is why we get to see that NEP, which was about reforms, educational reforms, teaching reforms, the whole idea has shifted from there. It has become a language battlefield, and it is risking national coherence, which should actually would have worked in this favor. And this is not the first time this is happening. Tamil Nadu has agitated against it, South Indian states have agitated against it, Maharashtra has agitated against it. All in all, we get to see that new education policy does not impose any language, yet its flexible and decentralized design has unintentionally intensified the linguistic war, and at the center of it lies Hindi, because Hindi has been perceived as a privileged language, and that is what led to a national spillover. So this is also a connected dimension, because if we look into the provision, there is no legal imposition of Hindi, yet we get to see that across the institutions there is greater institutional capacity in terms of teachers, textbook, central government communication. Increasingly with times we get to see only majorly in two languages, that is Hindi and English, and especially with three language formula, we get to see that this asymmetry is putting non-Hindi regions especially at disadvantage. That is why I was talking about the agitations that have come after NEP, because non-Hindi regions would be put at the disadvantage. Because if we are talking about two languages, then we have to consider one as English, that is important. But what about the third language? That is being seen as imposition of Hindi, and that is why southern and border states, what are they doing? They are responding with hard coding of language of their own in educational laws. They are using defensive regional language nationalism at the state level, and all in all that we are getting to see is the basically cascading of linguistic assertion across the federal units, which is definitely not a great news for a federation, which is definitely not a great news for a country which talks about diversity with pride, which takes pride in the fact that these federal units are the strength of the nation. And that is why this very spillover will have consequences. It will impact federalism. It will shift the concept of federalism from cooperative to something that is very competitive, and the competition is based on culture itself. So the interstate disputes which are about things such as water, they will get into unrelated governance areas and also culture and language as well. Furthermore, politics will also be involved here, because language would become another tool and it will be a mobilizer for the public which will be used. Other than that, border populations will be the most politicized one, because they remain the cultural sentinels of that particular state. And in terms of society, we will get to see that there will be excessive marginalization of especially hybrid linguistic identities, because it would be difficult for them to find a particular cultural identity and associate to it. And language would become a matter of loyalty test rather than a learning tool. and that shows that we lie at a risk of fragmentation internally based on something that could have brought us together, the diversity that you talk about, that can lead to cultural fragmentation within the states, outside the states, and at the national level as well. So in this context, it becomes very important for us in coming times to ensure that this trend does not persist, because if it does, we will get to see that we are finding more monolingual mandates. We will see that there also will be judicialization of cultural governance. There will be weakening of linguistic trust, which is embedded in the Indian federalism as well. And for that, we need to bring in changes. New education policy, where there is vagueness and ambiguity in terms of design, that needs to be corrected. There can be choice-based first language framework which can be aligned with new education policy. It is important that if language has to be brought in, then district level exceptions should be made, especially for the minorities. Strengthen work of statutory bodies, constitutional bodies, especially when we are talking about Commissioner for Linguistic Minorities, and mandatory interstate consultation for border regions are very important in this context. Let me know your suggestions in this very context, how these language wars can be resolved, how when we are known for diversity that can be brought in together. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comment section. I'll be leaving you with a practice question here. You can put down your answers in the comment section. And the answer for yesterday's question here is A. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.